You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, like some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we are back. We are back with some more main course and quite a bit of it now, with the Saints wrapping up their final preseason game against the Broncos, and then having the 53-man cut downs. And that leads to waiver claims and practice squad additions. So there's quite a bit to get into. But let's just recap real quick the Broncos and Saints final preseason game, the third preseason game of the 2025 season, leading into the season opener. But let's just go over that a little bit, and we can kind of pick out some players that got cut or got added to the practice squad, kind of just going off of some of these player stats. But anyways, let's get into it. We got quite a bit to get into. So can I get a menu? And so first, this is the Saints 28-19 loss to the Denver Broncos, who surprisingly, not necessarily surprisingly, but I guess I didn't know it until looking it up or seeing it, that the Broncos went 3-0 in the preseason, while the Saints couldn't even get a win. The Saints went, this is a classic NFC South type of record, 0-2-1, so 2 losses and the tie. But I will say the preseason games for the Saints, even though they didn't win any of them, were enjoyable to watch, in my opinion. I think that was maybe because there's a lot of young players and a lot of rookies that were probably going to make the team. But it was enjoyable. I enjoyed the preseason, and I think I also enjoy the preseason because even though I do get a little heated, a little fired up while watching preseason games, I still I can settle back down a lot easier than a regular season loss. But obviously, we need to go into the season knowing that the Saints aren't gonna be blowing anyone out, and we still have to go back to favor of the first 2 games of the 2024 season, when they look like absolute juggernauts. So even if we see that in the first couple of games, still be tentative in jumping on the bandwagon yet. But you know us Saints fans, us Hoodats out there, we never left. But anyways, let's get into some player stats, kind of the quarterback competition that we thought maybe it would be able to get a little more ground with where it was at, or would be able to make a final or a conclusive decision on who the starter was going to be, season opening starter, off of maybe the quarterback play in the third preseason game. But it really wasn't. It really just kept it pretty much neck and neck with the stats. Neither Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler did anything to really put them ahead in the QB race. And then obviously Jake Haener, he's still around, even though he didn't make the initial 53. He was still added to the practice squad. We'll get to that list later. But Tyler Shuck was 12 for 20, so he didn't start the game. So actually, let me go back to this. Spencer Rattler started the game, but he was 5 for 8 for 43 yards, missed on a deep ball to Rashid Shaheed, or a play that could have led to a touchdown to Rashid Shaheed. But yeah, no touchdowns, interceptions, only 43 yards. Just not enough to be like, yeah, Spencer Rattler, he's the guy, or he's better than Tyler Shuck. Like, didn't get that from the performance that we got from Spencer Rattler, but didn't get it from Tyler Shuck either, because he was 12 for 20, which that's just slightly above 50%. And then he was 100 for 102 yards, and then no touchdowns, no interceptions, and I think both of them were sacked twice as well. So Tyler Shuck was sacked 2 times, and Spencer Rattler was sacked 2 times. So the Saints, the quarterbacks or the offensive line, a little probably a mixture of both, giving up some sacks in this game. And then Tyler Shuck, he had a fumble in this game. So that was like one of the only statistics or negatives that you could have looked at Spencer Rattler during their preseason stats and their preseason games is Tyler Shuck hadn't coughed the ball up yet. They both had bad interceptions and were taking bad sacks and not really having great quarterback, not having real great pocket awareness. But Spencer Rattler, he just went ahead and just added one of those to his list of stats for the preseason. So maybe that's what led to Spencer Rattler being named the starter. So we'll just get that right out there in the air. So Spencer Rattler, he's your starter, and then obviously Tyler Shuck is your backup for now, for the present, and then they've got Jake Haener as your practice squad emergency quarterback, which during this time of year, not like you could have expected to get anyone a whole lot better than Jake Haener that knows your offense and can just, I guess, knows it and understands it, not necessarily says he can run it or go out there and perform with it, but I guess just knowing it is helpful. From familiarity, nepotism. He's been around long enough to know a guy that knows a guy. But that's your quarterback competition. Spencer Rattler, I guess for now has won it, but I would think that just a couple bad games or a losing streak to start the season, or even if the Saints are somehow like 2-2 and then go on like a 3 or 4 game losing streak, or Spencer Rattler is just terrible throwing interceptions and being a fumble merchant, then I could see Tyler Shuck coming back in. And I think that makes that a little bit easier for you to like flip flop between who your 2 quarterbacks are with Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck without maybe hurting the confidence of your second round pick this year, and it not being like, if we started the season with him and jumped to Spencer Rattler, then it would be like, would maybe feel kind of hard, and that you're maybe kind of mishandling the situation with Tyler Shuck, because you still got to remember he's a second round pick. So if we go from Spencer Rattler to Tyler Shuck and then go back to Spencer Rattler, then that wouldn't be quite as bad. But going from Tyler Shuck to Spencer Rattler and then trying to go back to Tyler Shuck, that just seems like malpractice and mishandling of your rookie second round pick quarterback. So I'm okay with it. And really the fact I just mentioned, not listed off their preseason performances, just that alone, you can't really be like angry about this decision, because you're like, I mean, they look pretty much exactly the same in preseason. So I just hope Spencer Rattler is able to just continue to improve. And my main thing is just quit just running into sacks and just like giving fumbles away. But if he can maybe improve on that, and maybe some of these skills position starters, having Alvin Kamara and having Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave full time, Juwan Johnson, and maybe hopefully the offensive line can get a little healthier. Maybe Spencer Rattler can settle in, and if not, I guess we'll be seeing Tyler Shuck later in the season. All right, so that's the quarterback competition. Let's go on to running back a little bit, because I feel like that this position was decided during this game, even though, and I'm talking about Devin Neal, number 30, Devin Neal, who hadn't really practiced all that much in training camp. I think he got a hamstring injury before the first game of preseason, so he wasn't able to play. So you had like some of these other guys like Cam Akers and Clyde Edwards-Helaire that kind of look good, but they're also veterans, but they were still young veterans. Even though they're veterans, they're still only like 25, 26 years old and have had experience on other teams. But Devin Neal, he came out and had 5 carries for 20 yards, which is a 4 yard per carry average, and just in his first roles and first snaps of seeing him, he looked good, and that led to Cam Akers and Clyde Edwards-Helaire not making this team. And I think, yeah, neither one of them, Saints don't have a running back on their practice squad. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he just, I guess he doesn't like it that much in Louisiana or New Orleans, and didn't feel as if the Saints were going to be good at all, which I can understand that. But he just went ahead, and now that he's got his life and mental health back on track, he just went back to his home team, or his draft team that drafted him, and who he won a couple Super Bowls with in Kansas City. So I don't blame him, but I felt that was kind of a homecoming for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I thought he was happy to be back in New Orleans and maybe trying to get a fresh start, but seems like he must got his ish together, so he's going back to Kansas City, and I'm a little disappointed in that, even though he had 2 carries for 4 yards for two-yard average, which and then in just all the preseason didn't have put up a lot of numbers. Like, the best thing and the thing that I'm going to be missing from Clyde Edwards-Helaire that I feel that he maybe does better than any running back on the roster now is that he's good at blocking, chipping, and blitz pickup. He did a wonderful job of that, but I don't know if you can keep a running back on your team just for them to do that. Maybe if they're a fullback, maybe if he was bigger and did more blocking, like out of the I formation and stuff. But I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's like 5'7", 200 pounds. So he's you can't, even though he's good at chipping. He's kind of like Mark Ingram, even though he's not like a super big guy. He gets underneath those blitzers. But I guess not going to have that, and end up with Devin Neal, Kendra Miller, Alvin Kamara, and Vele Jones Jr. as your running backs on your starting 53. So that's your running backs. Let's look at the wide receiver here. Not a whole lot changed from wide receiver. You had guys like Kevin Austin Jr. had I guess the best day for the third preseason game, but that wasn't enough to make the 53-man roster. But he had 3 catches for 34 yards, and then Chris Olave, which we know he was going to make the team, had 3 catches for 29 yards, and then Malik Matavio, the 6'8" Hawaiian, I think he's out of Hawaii, tight end, actually showed up and had some put up some numbers for the first time in this preseason. He had 3 catches for 23 yards, and then Trayton Welch had another 20-plus yard reception and crazy catches that he's made throughout preseason. But he had just 1 catch for 21 yards, and then none of the other receivers really did anything. But yeah, Trayton Welch, he was one of the players that got cut from the 53-man roster, and I was wondering, that one had me scratching my head there for a little bit, because I mean, the Saints need tight ends. They need one they need tight end, but they also need receivers, like big-bodied receivers, and him making some crazy catches against the Jaguars and showing that he can get some deep, then kind of intermediate deep routes, with catching 21-yard passes and things like that. I was surprised to see him cut, but luckily he was able to. No one else was watching those Jaguars or those Broncos preseason games too closely, because Saints were able to get him on the practice squad. And then, like I said, no one else really did a whole lot from the receivers. Not even Mason Tipton. We talked about Devin Neal earlier. He showed that he can catch too. Had 2 catches for 10 yards. So just in a limited supply of action there. He had 30 yards with what, five, six, with seven touches. So that's impressive. So that's your wide receivers. Now then on to some defensive players. Rajon White is at the top of your defensive list here for the day, just because he had 7 total tackles with 2 assists. Didn't have any sacks or interceptions. I think he may have had a pass deflection in this game. But yeah, Rajon White beating out some other corners that you maybe thought could make it, might maybe make it over him, like Rico Payton and what is it, Jaden Price. You're thinking maybe some of those guys would make it over him, but Rico Price, who ended up signing with the Giants, I think. No, yeah, Rico Payton, not Rico Price, but Rico Payton was a great special teams player and in a training camp darling and MVP the last couple of years. So a little disappointing to lose him, but Rajon Wright has shown a little bit of his stardom and shown that he can fill in as a depth piece in the secondary and can be a good special teamer as well. So seeing that from him, and then Quincy Riley ended up having the interception in this game. Had 2 assisted tackles, and then he had an interception. He picked off Sam Ellinger in this game as well. So Quincy Riley, who was a late round draft pick for the Saints, honestly looks during preseason at least looking like one of their better corners. Looks like, depending on where the health of Alontae Taylor is, he could possibly start because Alontae Taylor's hurt, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry, he got roasted a couple times in this game by what was it, Cortland Sutton. Burned him a couple times for what was it? Yeah, he had 4. Yeah, Cortland Sutton had 4 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown in this game, and most of that was against Kool-Aid McKinstry. So I was feeling kind of confident coming in this season, at least about Kool-Aid McKinstry, and then thinking that Alontae Taylor would be your slot, and then just kind of having to fill who you're going to fill with the other outside corner position, which looks like could be Quincy Riley now. But now we got question marks about Alontae Taylor's health, and then how good is Kool-Aid McKinstry going up against team's #1 receiver? He didn't look great doing it against the Broncos last Saturday. And let's see, anyone else here on this defense that showed out at all? Saints had a couple sacks in this game. Let's see, yeah. Josheen Davis had a sack in this game. I don't think that's not a player that made the 53. Jonah Williams had a sack in this game. Not a player that made the 53, but I think made the practice squad. Christian Boyd had a sack. He did make the 53. So he had 3 sacks, and that's something that's kind of showed up a little bit in at least 2 of the Saints preseason games, even though it's preseason and some of it's coming against second, third, fourth string players. Saints have shown that they can at least register sacks. I don't know about registering consistent pass rush pressure, but can get a sack every now and again. DeMarco Jackson, that was a linebacker that the Saints have had the last couple of years, who has been a good special teams ace, but in his time being a linebacker, like a starting linebacker, playing the linebacker position, did not look great this preseason. So he ended up not making the 53 after he's been on it the last couple years. And then, of course, he goes and signs with his old buddy Dennis Allen in Chicago with the Chicago Bears. But I think that's about all for the defense. And then returns, got Jaden Price had 2 kick returns for 55 yards. Vele Jones, who the Saints did keep, had a 39-yard kickoff return. And then Dante Pettis, who I don't think made the 53-man roster and didn't make the practice squad either. And I hated the returns that he had in the first game of the season, where he's like running horizontal diagonally, not just straight. But he had 1 kickoff return for 9 yards, which is an improvement from the week 1. And then Blake Groupie was perfect, 3 of 3, and Charlie Smith was perfect with Blake Groupie hitting an impressive 56-yard field goal, and Charlie Smith hitting a 52-yard field goal, and Charlie Smith hit an extra point as well. And then Kai Kroger was the only one that had any punts in this game. This is surprising with how this game played out. The Saints were the final score was 28-19, and the Saints had some possessions, were able to score some points, but also didn't look phenomenal at times in this game either, but only punted once in this game, and that was Kai Kroger. So you didn't even get to see burn up again. Alabama's burn up. Kai Kroger had 1 for 38 yards and a 1 inside the 20. So just out of all these positions, I think I said it on the last podcast that, man, punting just looks gross. And for the 49ers to make the 53 man cut down, they actually cut Thomas Morstead, but it was with the mutual understanding that once we get down to the final cuts and we get down to like 52 man and we fill out our practice squad, we'll bring you back. And I can understand why even though Thomas Morstead lives in Louisiana, lives in New Orleans, I can understand why he would like to go to a team that's potentially at least going to make the playoffs, even though they weren't great last year. But if their health is improved, I can definitely understand why not just Thomas Morstead, but any player, if they have the choices of going to a team that has playoff potentials or going to a team that has possibly possibly be the worst team in the league. Like, that's not even a coin flip of who they would want to go to, and that's even with players that have ties to LSU and Tulane and just Louisiana, where they went to high school or college. But yeah, so that's the third preseason game, the final preseason game of the 2025 season, which that was on Saturday, August 23rd, and that was against the Denver Broncos, 28-19, and the Saints finished with a 0-2-1 preseason record. Very Saintsy with how they've been the last couple of years, but that's the final preseason game. Let's get into some of the. I guess I kind of went over some of the roster cuts, but let's go over some waiver claims that the Saints made. Some waiver claims they made, and then they filled out their practice squad with 15 players already. But I'm loving these waiver claims because we talked about a similar situation where a player was cut, and there were players that played for the Saints before and actually played well for them. So I mentioned Thomas Morstead, just mentioned him. But then another one that I would have loved, that would have made me start feeling a lot better about the Saints wide receiving core, was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who the Saints revived his career last year, and he had some experience and familiarity with some of the Saints quarterbacks, put up some touchdowns and some yardages with Spencer Rattler throwing him the ball, and he's like 6'4", 200 pounds. So I was really hoping the Saints would have been able to sign him because he was cut from Seattle to make their 53-man roster, but he just like Thomas Morstead, he ends up going and signing with the 49ers. So at the moment, I hate them, but we got a good consolation prize in that, even that with that happening, because the Saints were able to add a pretty nice wide receiver through waiver claims, and even an offensive tackle. Need to go over some of the injuries the Saints have had, and need to go over trades before I get too deep into this practice squad. But they were able to add Trey Palmer, who was like the third or fourth wide receiver option for the Buccaneers the last couple of years. He's been kind of like their Harry Douglas, really an annoying player that picks up like just every now and then picks up third down receptions and picking up first downs and things like that. Never put up huge numbers with the Buccaneers, but definitely like to see him in black and gold a lot more than I do in Buccaneers colors. So yeah, the Saints adding Trey Palmer, a wide receiver, to their receiving corp is a nice addition, and then they also were able to sign Xavier Truist from the Broncos. So he must have been a player that hopefully maybe Sean Payton gave them a little good insight on, and they were able to get an up close look at him last week. But before I'm getting, like I said, I'm getting ahead of myself, already getting into like the final like practice squad that we list that we've created today. But before I get into that, I need to get into some of these trades that the Saints have made due to lack of skill at position, and then lack of depth at position. So this happened like a week ago, where the Saints traded player for player, which you don't really see that, where it's just straight up player for player. And the Saints did that because they had lost Will Clapp and Nick Salvaderi, so they've lost interior offensive linemen. So they needed those players done for the season, or done or put on PUP, or starting the season on IR. So Saints are just we started becoming decimated at interior offensive line depth. So yeah, I mentioned Will Clapp, Nick Salvadera, but also Trevor Penning with his turf toe as well. So they just had to add. I'm really that's one thing I am a little impressed by, and happy to see that the Saints were able to add some depth where they really needed it. They were able to add those offensive linemen. Sorry, there's a damn bug flying around in here. But so yeah, I like that, trading Luke Fortner, center guard / guard from the Jaguars when we just played them, and we traded him straight up for Binks, Colin Saunders, who I was never a huge fan of him anyways. I never really thought he was signed with Nathan Shepard and Colin Saunders. They were both signed in like the same offseason to try to come over and help the Saints run defense that had been terrible the last year or so. And then they didn't help. Nathan Shepard, I think, is still on the team, but Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, they definitely didn't help with the run game, the run defense at all. The greatest thing that Colin Saunders ever did while he was here was play fullback. I enjoyed seeing him play fullback and his goal line alignments and carries. I like that. And then him also dropping back into like zone coverage in that game against Kansas City last year, and almost house calling an interception off of Patrick Mahomes. That was probably the the greatest thing he ever did as a Saint. Maybe not even as a Saint, but just as as a NFL player altogether. But I'm good with trading. Being he didn't really fit the Saints defense anyways, and I don't think just as a straight defensive tackle position that we're needing him for. Don't think he was really that great of a player anyways. So they trade him for Luke Fortner, whose first two seasons started all 17 games for the Jaguars, I think at center mostly. And then just last year, 2024, he played in all 17 games, was active for all 17 games, but didn't have any starts. So I'm good. I like that. I think he could easily be an upgrade over the backups, maybe that got hurt, or I have to see how good Trevor Penning or Cesar Ruiz actually are, because it wouldn't surprise me if he's better than them too. So I'm good with that trade. The Saints had an abundance of defensive tackles anyways. Seeing how you don't need quite as many in a 3-4 defense. And now then on to the trade that I don't like. I've been good with all this, most of this moving and shaking that the Saints have done, but don't like this trade at all because it just seems like way too much to give up for. Because you see that the Saints were able to just claim Trey Palmer, who I guess can't say that he had as good a year as Devon Bailey, wide receiver from the Broncos. But not like Devon Bailey is had like a great season either. He had what, like 400 yards for 41 catches and like 3 touchdowns. Like, yeah, I guess those are good numbers for like a third, fourth wide receiver. Which hopefully, if there's not a ton of injuries, that's what he'll be. But that's not really the kicker for this. The kicker for this is that Devon Bailey, he was a rookie last year, but he was 27 years old, and he'll be 28, I think, on Christmas. I think his birthday is on Christmas. So he's like a 28-year-old sophomore player. That's just crazy. And I think he has some uh, lingering knee issues, knee histories with knee injuries. So don't like that. So they gave up a fourth and a 2026 fourth round pick for him. So you couldn't tell me they couldn't find a fourth round pick, a wide receiver in the fourth round last year, or that this pick will probably be a top 150 pick coming up, probably better than that, probably like a top 100, 120 pick in the fourth round coming in this coming draft, depending on how bad the Saints are. You tell me they couldn't find a decent receiver in the fourth round then? Not as if they need Devon Vele, like adding like players and trading for players when your team isn't going to be good anyways. I just don't like that. So the Saints got Devon Bailey in a 2027 seventh round pick. No, they didn't get anything back. So they just got Devon Bailey, and then they gave up a 2026 fourth and a 2027 seventh for him. But not a huge fan of it, even though I guess Sean Payton talked about how he's good, and some people in that organization that were with the Saints, were coaches with the Saints, kind of comparing him to Marcus Colston because it gets the size that the Saints need because he's what 6'4", 6'5", 220. So I mean, you get the size, but he's also like already about to be rolling him into the nursing home because he's a 20-year-old second year player, 28-year-old second year player, and we just claimed Trey Palmer, who's what going into his third season, and he's 24 years old. And I would say, besides the size difference, they're very comparable players in regards to production and being like a third or fourth wide receiver on the team that they were on the previous year. So not a huge fan of that. And then the Saints were able to trade for Asim Richards, offensive tackle, and they were able to get Asim Richards and a 2028, not 2026, not 2027, but three years out, a 2028 seventh round pick back for him, and they gave the Dallas Cowboys a a 2028, I think, yeah, 2028 sixth round pick. So it's just basically nothing for him. Just making sure that they secure Asim Richards, because I assume there was players in front of them on waiver claims that would have gotten him if the Saints didn't at least secure him. So I love how the Saints have added to their offensive line where they needed the offensive line help, with adding Luke uh, Fortner and Asim Richards. And Asim Richards, he brings like size, because they lost size and an offensive tackle, because they lost Landon Young had an ankle injury in this past game against the Broncos. So not no real telling when he'll be back. So being able to have some more depth offensive line is nice, because it was looking grim there. But I feel as if it's kind of, and if we get Trevor Penning back, it's to be kind of back to where it was when training camp started. But losing those guys, Nick Salvadere, Will Clapp, or Landon Young, Trevor Penning, like, man, just got decimated at offensive line. But yeah, I like the Seam Richards trade, and he's an offensive tackle. So now you have a third option behind Talise Fuaga and Kelvin Banks Jr. But what I'm trying to say about what he brings to this team is size, because that's what Kellen Moore is used to, is just a gigantic offensive line, where like the average weight and size, like the average size of these guys is like 6'5", 6'6", 330 pounds, and that's what you get from Asim Richards here, who's he's like 6'6", 6'7", 330 pounds, which I think a lot of the Saints offensive line, like Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy, I know they're not offensive tackles, but those guys are kind of small. They're just are like 6'4", 6'3", just barely 300 pounds. So, and that's kind of been the Saints' problem, not having a good running game. So they need to add more size. Like the only like real like big and kind of outlier big offensive lineman they have on the team is Trevor Penning, who's a lot of people want to say he's not any good, or he's just hurt all the time. So that's the trades. I was getting a little too far ahead of myself with the practice squad, and talking about how I'm glad they added Trey Palmer, and glad they added Xavier Truss as well. So with adding Luke Fortner, Asim Richards, and Xavier Truss, I think that kind of puts the Saints offensive line depth kind of where it was before Trevor Penning got hurt, and then everyone else started getting hurt as well. So I have to kind of congratulate the New Orleans Saints, and I'm kind of impressed at how they were able to at least fill those holes. They pretty much just had nobody, no depth behind their initial five starters. So I'm glad. I'm glad to see that, and the wide receiver depth. Man, I would have loved it if the Saints would have had MVS, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, uh, Brandon Cooks, Devon Vele, and Mason Tipton. Like, that's looks decent compared to how trash it looked just a couple months ago. But Trey Palmer, he's only 6 foot, so he doesn't bring the size that I would have maybe hoped for if we were able to get MVS back. But I think he's younger, and he's shown potential. Like I said, he was kind of like the Harry Douglas, annoying first down, third down converting merchant for the Buccaneers. So I'm glad to have him on the Saints, and the Saints, he's definitely an odd man out with the Buccaneers anyway. So just because he's odd man out there doesn't mean he's not any good. Because I mean, they have Chris Godwin, who's, I guess, recovering quite nicely from his off-season injury, so he's maybe expected to be back a little bit sooner than expected. And then they have the Mika Abuka, yeah, I think that's what his name, Mika Ibuka, out of Ohio State that they drafted in the second round, and then of course they have Mike Evans. So Trey Palmer, not that he's not a good player, just the odd man out uh, with stacked wide receiver um, room in the Buccaneers. All right, so now this is the last thing. Just kind of list off the Saints practice squad. Most of its players that were already on the team, and the Saints are just adding them to it, and they just were players that just couldn't make the initial 53. But we'll go over these 15 players here. So we have uh, Kevin Banks Jr., wide receiver, who was formerly on the team already. Dallas Bainham, cornerback. Don't necessarily remember uh, hearing that name too much during training camp. Terrell Burgess, safety. Elliot Davison, safety. Hunter Decker, quarterback. The one that I'm really happy to see. I was a little worried that the Saints were going to lose him there for a minute because it was coming kind of late into the afternoon before seeing that he was at practice and was probably added to their practice squad. But Fidel Diggs, defensive end, one of the one of the rookies. He was like a seventh round pick by them out of Syracuse. He was all over the place and wreaking a lot of havoc and registering sacks during the preseason. So I had to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that he didn't end up getting signed by some other team. And then we see him have like 5 sacks and like see that he already has registered like 5 sacks in like week 14 or something. So from some other team. So I'm glad to see that the Saints uh, were able to re-add him, Fidel Diggs, everybody's favorite sexy Jake Hayner, cornerback. Uh, kind of odd that the Saints feel the need to have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, but I understand one of them's kind of a younger prospect, and Hunter Decker. I think I do believe, yeah, he's a rookie, and then you have Jake Hayner, who's in his 3rd year, quarterback. Easton Kilty, tackle. Jaden Price, cornerback. Nephi Sewell, linebacker. Charlie Smith, kicker. It'd be nice to see if they end up using the IPP on him, the International Path Program. So it opens up another spot on the practice squad. But if they do that, then he won't be able to play in the 2025 season. So be interesting to see how that plays out a little bit more. I think I'd like to have him because he definitely would be a good backup or emergency plan if something did happen to Blake Groupie, who looked out of every Saints player this offseason perfect in practice and perfect in preseason. So let's hope Blake Groupie can carry that over into the regular season and into like stressful, dramatic moments, like game tying or game winning, or push you to overtime type of field goal kicks, or even just making sure you make your extra point on kicks to give you like a 1 point lead towards the end of games. That'd be real nice. And then Jack Stoll, tight end. Trayton Welch, tight end. That was the other player that I was really happy to see that the Saints were able to re-add to their practice squad. Fidel Diggs, Charlie Smith, and Trey Welch, definitely the 3 that I'm really happy to see. See that they were able to re-add to their practice squad. And then Jonah Williams and Jonah Williams, defensive end Jonah Williams, and then wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr. So not too many unfamiliar names there, and it's a kind of what you expected. The kind of players that were just kind of left out of the 53-man roster. got added to got added to the Saints practice squad anyways. The only two that can see that didn't get added that they may have wanted would have been Rico Payton and DeMarco Jackson. Those are about the only ones because there's players like who's a second round pick just a couple of years ago, Isaiah Foskey. He didn't seem like anyone was interested in him, but like I said, similar to our Fidel Diggs story, we'll see him towards the end of the year, week 13, week 15, he'll be on some other team, some Super Bowl contending team where he has like 5 sacks somehow already. But yeah, that's what's going on with the Saints. They've looks like they've got their 53-man roster decided, and they got their practice squad decided. And I mean, at least they're telling us they've picked their quarterback, their starter for week 1. They were the last team to officially announce that. But hey, that's what it'll be. About a week and a half. The Saints will be playing the Arizona Cardinals. I do believe. Let's see. I can't remember if that's a home game or not. Yeah, playing a home game at 12 p.m. Central, Sunday, September 7th. So hopefully, Kellen Moore uh, has at least, if nothing else, has uh, constructed the best possible team he could with the talent that was already here and the draft picks and the cap space they had. Hopefully, it's the best that they could do, and I'm going to stay positive and say that it is, and we'll just have to kind of recap what they look like each week. I guess that's what we're here for the podcast each week, and hopefully, if nothing else, once we get to, like we've been saying, those week 14, week 15, hopefully we see some progression. I know it's pretty early to be talking about that now, but progression and growth, and maybe something that we can carry over into the 2026 season. But hopefully hopefully we don't look too amazing where we end up messing up any draft position. If the Saints are even that bad, if they're good, then they're good, and I want them to be good, and I want them to win. But that's the Saints roster, and that's the Saints practice squad, and there may be couple more moves here and there in the next week and a half or so. But I think for now, this is your 2025 New Orleans Saints. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?